podcast you've been looking for all along. Step into the life of urban exploration with guests from around the world. Welcome to No Tracers. Welcome back to the No Tracers podcast. I'm your host, K, just the letter K. You can find me at no.tracers on Instagram or just the letter K on YouTube or No Tracers on TikTok. All my links are down in the description. Welcome to the show. This week on the podcast, I am speaking with DragonboyAC, who is out of the northeast of the United States. Super stoked to talk about him. He actually reached out to me after a bunch of his friends were on the show. So if you want to come on the No Tracers podcast, just shoot me a DM at no.tracers on Instagram and we'll schedule a show for you. Would love to hear your stories and share them with the world. Before we get into this episode, there's a few housekeeping things I need to let you know about. First of all, if you're new to the podcast, please hit the subscribe button. Would love to send you notifications every time there's a new episode. There's also a new feature on Apple Podcasts where you can subscribe to a show properly and donate to it. I don't really know how it works, but if you want to support the show further, hit the subscribe button, and thank you for doing that. If you've been listening to the show for any amount of time, please do me a favor and leave a rating and feedback. It helps us grow. It helps us find a broader audience of listeners just like you, and it means a lot to me. If you do leave a rating and feedback, take a screenshot of it and DM it to me on Instagram at No Tracers, and I will actually send you a signed photo print from an abandoned place I've explored as a way of saying thank you for doing that. Secondly, I have a book out, a photography book called No Tracers, an Urban Explorer's Diary. If you would like to pick up a copy of it, signed by me, head to notracers.com/shop or just go down in the description and click on the link to the website. You can also find my blog there and my videos there as well. Thanks for doing that. Appreciate it. If you order a book, I'll send you a signed photo print as well. And lastly, we have a partner on this podcast, and that is Liquid Death Water. If you've never heard of Liquid Death Water, don't worry. I've got an ad coming for you in 3, 2, 1. From the streams of the Austrian Alps comes a new kind of water. A water that is sure to raise you from your grave. If you're tired of buying cases of plastic water bottles that contain carcinogens and God knows what else, or if you're trying to lower your waste footprint, Liquid Death comes in beautifully rugged aluminum cans. Murder your thirst with a can of Liquid Death. Check the link in the description and use code JustTheLetterK at checkout for 10% off your order. Liquid Death. Murder your thirst. So if you want 10% off your order, head to liquiddeath.com and use code JustTheLetterK. I think you also have to buy a 2-pack koozie thing, something like that. I don't really know. They kind of changed up the rules on us. So if you want that 10% off, you also have to get koozies for your mountain water. Thanks for doing that, guys. Thanks for supporting the podcast. Let's jump into this episode. DragonboyAC, please introduce yourself and how long you've been exploring to the No Tracers audience.
Hi, I'm DragonboyAC. I've been exploring for probably about 4 years now, on and off.
Nice. So what got you into exploring in the first place? What made you catch this bug?
It was kind of just one of those natural things that kind of started evolving. My best friend, who's not in this community, she's not an explorer necessarily, but I remember we would always talk about doing these kind of things, things that we had found online, or the YouTube videos that we would watch at 2 a.m. when we had nothing to do. And we finally were well, I know where this is, or I know where this is. Well, let's just start going. So I think back maybe 2016, 2017, every once in a while we would go to one or two places. We had no idea what we were doing, or the idea of actually getting caught or any of those things were super profound. But yeah, it just kind of grew from there.
So tell me about your first exploration ever. Bring me into what, the place you went into, what it was like there, and what made you want to keep doing this after that first exploration.
So we did a couple, again with my friend, we did a couple of things on and off, but I think the one big, the thing that I always interpret as my first thing was there's this abandoned trolley graveyard in Pennsylvania, and I remember like looking back, we did everything wrong. Like we we found the pin, we did all the research, we did everything, but it's like 5 hours away. We booked a hotel. We're like, yeah, we'll just go drive there. We'll figure it out. We had no information other than where it was. We had no plan B, C, or D. And we just like drove there and did it. And we got in. It was beautiful. It's just like a bunch of old trolleys in the woods out in PA. And I remember we drove the whole way. We drove right there. We didn't go to the hotel or anything. And it was funny because it like had just started thunderstorming. My friend's freaking out. And she's like, oh my God, like we can't do this. Like we're going to do it. And we literally park on the side of this road and we like run into the woods and we find the place. And it was just magical. The trees were blowing. The wind was going crazy. And that was like the first like thing that I kind of associate with like more like exploration-y type things that we really did. And I think after that I was like, oh my God, I love this. And even then before that, like I really wasn't like attempting to take pictures or do anything. So that was like the first time I like pulled out my phone and was like, oh my God, like let's just start taking pictures of these things. This is so cool.
Wow. I'm looking at the photos online. I just kind of Googled it to see what they looked like. And it's like, I remember my first time exploring like a train, you know, an abandoned train or, you know, similar to trolleys. And like, it's such a crazy experience seeing stuff like that because there's so many railroads in America that are just completely abandoned. And like,
oh, for sure.
I had another guest on recently and he gave a tip for all the explorers out there. Like if you want to find abandoned farmhouses, find the old abandoned train tracks because they always ran past the farmhouses. And I was like, dude, you're a genius. Like, how did you figure this out? You know, he was like,
absolutely.
Just like look at maps and stuff. And so you started on a phone, like iPhone?
I still use my phone. That's the big,
Wow. Like solely? You don't have like a DSLR or anything?
Truthfully, I barely even know how a camera works.
Wow.
I can press the button for like when I'm out with my friends, I can do that for them. But other than that, no. It kind of goes into this whole thing about like, I started on my phone and I still do it. I've upgraded my phone a couple of times, but I'm a big fan of no matter what I'm doing, whether it's my music or like I'm in design school, working with what you have and making things that aren't necessarily at the top of like the line, like as good as they can be. I've always kind of gravitated to doing those kind of things. So I would love to know how I can. It's not like I don't want to learn at some point. It's just like, it's been working really well for me. And like, as far as like, I like what I can produce out of it. And yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're paying like over $1,000 for a phone you're basically paying for the camera anyway, you know?
Yeah, that's occurred to me too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these phones are definitely competing with the cameras we have these days, and it's very fascinating to watch the growth over time of like where phones are going. So I mean, like nobody can knock you for using an iPhone or like an Android or whatever it is you have, you know?
Yeah, I currently have the 12. I have the Pro Max.
Oh,
I literally just got it I just got it probably a couple months ago. But it's funny because again, when I started, like I think I had like the 7 or the 8 iPhone at the time. And, like it was fine. And I remember I used to edit just using like the filters on Instagram, and like I was like, oh, this is fine. This is whatever. And like over time, like I started going out more and doing more things and meeting more people and networking, and like I use different like editing apps, and I used this or that, and my phone would keep upgrading. And it's funny because I think maybe about a year ago now, like when I think iPhone finally got like their wide angle and they started getting all those things situated, like I would just see my friends with their upgraded iPhones and like I would be like, oh my God, like okay, well I could just upgrade my phone and do that, as opposed to, because at that point I think I was starting to cave and think about maybe getting a camera. And at that point I'm like, well they're getting really good. So
yeah, exceptionally good. It's crazy. And speaking of like gear and things that you use, can you talk about your favorite gear or gear recommendations for new explorers, like things you carry with you, like a backpack or your shoes or a light or anything that you bring with you that you think that explorers need to have with them when they go exploring?
Yeah, absolutely. So coming from somebody who doesn't carry a camera around or like a big tripod or any of that, like I feel like less is definitely more. Most of my friends have huge bags filled with stuff like all the time, be it props or be it, again, like you have like all your camera equipment, which is totally fine. That's generally the nature. But especially if you're first starting out, or if you don't have a camera, or even if you do, I feel like getting like smaller bags. Like I don't know if I can recommend one specifically, but my backpack is generally very small, and it definitely forces me to keep minimal things on me, because when you're getting into buildings or getting in and out of places, you have to leave really quickly or get in a really small area. Having less stuff is definitely super beneficial. Aside from that, as far as just hardware in general, I have an LED light that I use. What's it called? Can't remember the name right now, but even that's really small. And like having that, especially if you're doing phone photography, is super helpful as well, because like there are certain things that your phone cannot do versus a camera. If you're just like doing this for fun, but you want to take pictures in a dark area, you definitely need to bring some sort of like hardware light to assist with what you're doing, like basic things like that.
Definitely, yeah. And I love talking gear. I think it's so fascinating. Like, also, do you wear a respirator ever when you go into these places?
It's funny. I used to not at all, because when you're in your early mid-20s, you think you're invincible, and then you start to realize that you're not. But I just got one recently, and I've been pretty religious about it so far. But that's been definitely helpful, and I definitely recommend, even if you don't have one and you have like just like a normal mask that you've been wearing for COVID, I think like any little bit helps, especially if you're going to be in a place for a couple hours. Me and my one friend Kay explored, we were in a place in Jersey doing like setups and like cleaning out like a place and trying to rearrange everything in it, and we were in a place, I think like we were meeting once a week there for the last couple weeks, and oh God, we were in it one time. We were in there for, I guess, like over like 6 or 7 hours, like moving stuff around. And like when I left, I felt like absolute garbage. And I was just like, okay, yeah, now is the time to get a respirator. I understand why people do this.
Yeah, and like I've had friends tell me like they've had to go to like the doctor, and their doctor is like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing?
Oh, we've been there. Yeah.
Your lungs are not great. Like, come on now. Like, I always recommend people wear at least a mask, like you were saying, or a respirator if they can get their hands on one. And now with like you said, with COVID, like we all have masks, and like
we all have some form of mask. Yeah,
us explorers, we've just been wearing them longer. and then when COVID hit, I was like, wait, you mean I get to wear my mask in public? What?
All the time.
Sick.
I get to wear my mask in non-abandoned places. Oh my God.
It's been quite a trip.
And even then, like with like, especially with gear and stuff, like, I know some people will laugh, but like definitely like first aid kits and things like that, like are definitely useful when you're going into these places. I know sometimes like, like just having the littlest things, I feel like a lot of the big misconception is like, I think like a lot of people just assume like, if you're not in this hobby, like that we're all like, oh, like, wow, you guys are going into these places, you guys are crazy. But 9 times out of 10, we're all artists first. And I feel like artists, I can only speak for myself, but artists are notoriously babyish. So we'll get like a paper cut and we'll freak out. So it's like, so definitely having little things like that are super useful or super, super helpful.
Definitely. Speaking of like first aid kits and getting cuts and scrapes, do you have any urban exploration injury stories that you can share?
Injury stories? Truthfully, I've been fairly fortunate. I don't really know if I've had any like terrible things happen. I've heard the only thing, it was funny you were talking about going to the doctor. The only thing that did happen that's even worth mentioning is I was in a house in Connecticut with my friend, probably back in September, and we were in there cleaning it out again. We were in there for I think like 2 days in a row, like moving stuff around. And it was funny because I got back home after the second day and I was super itchy and like I didn't know what was going on at first. I'm like, oh my God, do I have fleas? Like, what did I do? And I ended up going to the doctor, and the doctor was like, you have folliculitis. And I was like, what even is that? And they're like, oh, it's like a hair follicle infection that like can spread. And I'm like, that's terrible. And the doctor's like, what were you doing? And I was like, I was in an abandoned house, like taking pictures. And then the doctor just looks at me and it's like, why did you like take your clothes off or anything? Like, I don't understand how that happened. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And I'm like sitting there quietly looking at him, like, I laid on the floor at one point to take a picture. And they're like, why did you lay on the floor? I'm like, well, I mean, you got to do what you got to do to take the picture. Like, so no injuries, but definitely strange experiences that have resulted in me going to the doctor.
Just a hair follicle infection, no big deal.
Yeah, totally minor. Yeah, bizarre. Meanwhile, like, I have so many friends who will do like all sorts of crazy things in abandoned places, and I'm like, careful, watch out for folliculitis.
Oh man, I've now heard it all. I've heard it all.
Yeah, honestly, it was the wackiest experience that I truly feel like could have only happened to me. So if anybody out there has had folliculitis from being in an abandoned building, we can form a support group. Now would be the time. I would greatly appreciate it.
Oh God, amazing. Can you talk about the mentality of an urban explorer? What makes you do this? Like, it's not a normal thing to go into these abandoned places. Like, what makes us, like, what drives us to do this?
I think, speaking for me, one thing that I've always really enjoyed about it, like especially like now that I'm doing this more regularly, I feel like I'm out doing this at least once a week, if not more. And I feel like it's been the idea of being able to merge many of my interests together. Like I've always been fascinated with like the obvious things like decay and like what's left behind and like those kind of things, but that's basically the common denominator between all of us. But for me specifically, like I play guitar. I love doing like my portraits or taking pictures of my guitar in these places. I'm a graphic design major. I'm trying to get into that field, like being able to take pictures and edit most importantly, and being able to set things up and kind of rearrange and kind of working my brain in that way has always been really exciting for me. So I like trying to merge my hobbies together, and I feel like for me it's gotten very addicting because not only are you getting out there and like being one with nature and seeing new things, but I also have found ways to kind of incorporate other parts of my brain in it, and I feel like it's just been a very like easy, laxed way of doing it.
Yeah, definitely. It's so fascinating to me, like as an explorer, like hearing what other explorers think about this. It's
Yeah, oh absolutely. I mean, like it's funny because like this is one of those, I mean, you could say it about any hobby or any community of people, but like I've don't know if I've been part of one specifically, that there's so many different people from so many different areas and so many different age ranges and so many different walks of life, and our common denominator is that we all like to go into abandoned buildings, and we have to like live with each other and communicate with each other and deal with each other on a regular basis, and we all have to find common ground and not try to kill each other.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
True. Can you tell me about your scariest exploration experience? This could be running into people, police. This could be supernatural stuff if you're into that. Scariest exploration.
Yeah. So this is a weird one. So about maybe 2 years ago or so, I had just started getting into this a little bit more. And when you first start doing this regularly and you're not getting in trouble, you think you're like immortal. And my friend at the time had given me a pin. Again, she's not an explorer, and she had found a pin to a place, and she was like, "Hey, this looks really cool. Like, you should go." I'm like, "All right." So I finally, like at the end of the summer, I went there. It's this religious building on the East Coast, and I go there, every door is unlocked. I had never really been in a place that was like completely clean, that I hadn't seen on Instagram before, so I was very thrown off. I had really never seen it before. And I go for a little while and I leave. I go back the next week with my explorer friend who kind of got me into the community. And we were there for like 4, 5, 6 hours. We met a local kid there who showed us like even more stuff. It was one of my favorite explorers to date. And following that, she started getting a lot of less than kind messages from other urbexers who were trying to get the location from her, and they were harassing her about it, and she's starting to block people, and I had never experienced anything like that before, so I was like, oh my god, like people do this. And one message she got was from a guy who claimed he was the groundskeeper of the place that found her page, and he was like, I have your information, your name's on your account, I already told the police, like, take your pictures down. And she told me about it, and we were like, oh, it's not a big deal, like whatever. She blocked him, I blocked the person, I thought it was fine. And then like 5 or 6 hours later, I'm at a band rehearsal, and I'm sitting there and I'm playing guitar, and I look down at my phone, and I had like 7 missed calls from my mom, and I'm like, someone's dead, the world is on fire, something is happening. And I call my mom back, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, so I'm on Facebook, and I have this guy messaging me claiming he's a groundskeeper of a property that you went into, and he wants you to delete your photos and unblock him so he can talk to you. And I was like, what? So I immediately call my friend, and I'm like, you need to take your pictures down. She's like, I'm not taking my pic. I'm like, take your fucking pictures down. And I get home and I unblock the guy, and he's literally like, I'm really not playing around. Like, you keep posting it. Like, I just arrested people here like a couple days ago. Like, I gave the cops your information. I had my full name in my bio at that point.
Damn.
which is, I'm assuming, how he found my mother's Facebook account. And yeah, it was just a really surreal experience that I never thought would happen. And I remember my friend had talked to a couple of her friends at the time, and they were all like, yeah, like normally it's that whole thing, like the whole stigma of like, once you leave the place, if you don't get caught, you're okay. But I don't really know what he really could have done, but regardless, it was like, this guy's messaging my mom on Facebook, and my mom's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, it was just a really strange, stressful, bizarre experience.
That's crazy, man. People are like super protective over their spots, you know? And
and you know what? I give him full credit for it. On a certain level, he did what he needed to do. I never posted that place again.
Damn, just keep that in your memory, I guess, you know? But
yeah.
Some of the coolest places we're not supposed to be in, you know?
Yeah, for sure. To this day, I have him unblocked on Facebook, and I think just because I was like very kindly, I took my pictures out. Every once in a while, he'll still message me and be like, hey, have you heard anything about this place? And I'm like, nope, literally nothing, which is true. I really never do. And I'm like, nope, nothing at all. He's like, thanks, bud. And I'm like, all right, I'm at the bud level now with him. We're good now.
Now you should get to the point where you're like, yo, you mind if we come back?
Yeah, I know. I've literally thought about that like every day. Every time he messages me, I'm like, is this the time I'm going to ask? Or I'm like, not. I give full credit, though. I think my mom talking him down from his fury definitely helped. My mom went into the he's a good boy speech, even though I'm 25 years old. And he was literally, and he's like, listen, I get it. I'm like, all right, we're going to be okay.
Oh, my God. Amazing. And aside from that one, I know you said it was one of your favorite explorations, but do you have another like favorite exploration that you've been on?
Yeah, it's a little more, I think, outside of the box than I guess like houses and any of those kind of things. But again, a couple years ago, I think, it's probably 3 years ago now. There's an Air Force base, a radar base actually, in Vermont. It's pretty public knowledge. I think it's called East Haven. I went there by myself. Well, I was staying with my family a couple years ago. I was staying with my family. We were on vacation, and I took my car and I drove up there. It's maybe a couple hours from where we were staying, and it's the top of this mountain. It's a Cold War radar base that's been out since like the late 60s, I think. And a lot of graffiti, and it's super beat up, but like when you're up there, you're alone. It's a 10-mile road up this mountain. It's the only road up the mountain. And I'm somebody who is definitely afraid of heights and doesn't like those kind of things, but I forced myself to go up there. The road had no service, so I was totally like alone. Like it was a very narrow, like you really couldn't turn around. You had to kind of keep going once you're up there. And I got up there, I got up to the tallest building. I climbed ladders. I was walking up like old metal staircases. I'm sweating, I'm freaking out because, like, again, heights alone. And I got up to the top, and literally that view was so incredible. And I think about it fairly regularly. I remember I honestly cried. Like I was so like in awe at that moment of like looking around and just seeing and hearing absolutely nothing except like trees at the peak of this mountain. And it was wild. Like, and I think about that all the time. It's not necessary. I feel like it's a little more nature driven than some urban explorations, but like I love it. I think once I did that, truthfully, that was the moment where I was like, yeah, I need to keep chasing this feeling. This is incredible.
Oh yeah. And I know a little bit about that place. Like I know that they've had like UFO sightings and stuff there, like in East Haven.
Yeah.
So it's like a weird spot. And like just reading about it, like back in the, when was it? Like early 60s or something, like some snowmobilers were there, and this guy ended up getting like decapitated by like a chain that went across the road.
Oh like, my God, that one I had not heard of.
Crazy shit happens at this place, apparently.
Yeah, if anybody hears this or knows about it and wants to go, just don't go alone. Yeah. Definitely don't do that. And like, I would honestly say hiking up it, even though it takes a couple hours, is probably better than doing the car thing. I know a lot of people do it. I did it. I took an SUV, but like, it's definitely more difficult than just like doing the normal, like, let's just hike up it and do it.
Damn. Yeah, that's 10-mile hike that's a lot.
Well, there's a barrack about halfway up that you can, or probably a little more than that you can kind of get to. I remember I was driving forever and I got to the barracks. I'm like, oh, am I here? And I literally got out and looked, and I just see it at the top of the peak still. I'm like, oh, I still have a little bit to go.
Damn. Yeah, I love like the longer explorations though. I think they're a lot more fun. Like I did there's an abandoned nuclear power plant in Elma, Washington.
That's incredible.
It's got like two cooling, well, 1.5 cooling towers. The second one wasn't fully constructed. And it's like 600,000 square feet underground tunnels. And like this band that I know they rented it out because it still has like a groundskeeper and they do tours and stuff. So they rented it out for like 2 days, called me and they were like, hey, we know you like exploring abandoned places. Do you want to come shoot behind the scenes for us? And like, also explore at your own volition. And I was like, you mean go to a nuclear power plant and hang out? Yeah, let's do it. So just like
so fantastic,
just like roaming around for 2 days. I like climbed a crane, I went into the cooling tower. Like it was so sick. So sick.
Yeah, some of the best times are when you get to go to places and like you have like the permission to do so. It's like a totally different, it changes the entire feel of a place and just like makes you like feel like you're more attentive to detail at that point because you're like that whole side of your brain that's not like
panicking.
Yeah, it's not panicking and freaking out the entire time, gets to actually like pay attention to what you're doing.
Exactly.
That being said too, I feel like that's like one of the other advantages that I found just personally, like using a phone, is I feel like a lot of the time, because again, like a lot of my friends are incredible content creators and incredible artists and have incredible visions, but like, and I don't, being able to point and shoot, I think keeps me kind of, because I don't really consider myself necessarily like a photographer. I know I will have friends who will yell at me for saying that, but like I try to explore first, and I feel like being able to do the mobile game and being able to point and click and be like, oh, I'll edit it in post later, it's okay, definitely keeps you able to like go and look around and do those kind of things a little easier. I feel like I'm a person who likes to take like 1,000 pictures in a place and doesn't necessarily need like the 1 or 2 shots that everybody takes or like the 1 or 2 things I definitely see. I want to take a picture of everything and look at it later. Yeah. So that's definitely been an advantage, I would say, how my brain works.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as for myself as a videographer, I feel like because I shoot a lot of B-roll for my videos, I feel like I capture a lot more of the details than the overall image. And I think that's super like critical when you're going into these places, especially if you don't know if you're going to go back to them. You know, you want to capture every little detail that you can. And I think that, you know, capturing like the rust and like the woodwork and like things like that, like the actual decay is so cool, like especially when you're doing like B-roll stuff or, you know, even photography.
Oh yeah, totally. I think I know a lot of people who are in the process of like, you know, you're constantly learning how to get better at your craft, and like people who like want to be better photographers who get very discouraged, or like they see something and they're like, oh God, like that looks really cool, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to take the picture. I don't know if I want to take my whole camera out and do that. And like my feeling is like, if you want to do it, go for it and try, because you got to get better. But also too, like if you want to have it for yourself, like pull out your phone and do it. Like no one's going to judge you for doing that. Like you're doing this for you, or ideally you'd be going into these places and taking pictures for you because you want to see things and enjoy them and remember them like one day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And do you have a favorite history of a place? We do a lot of research before we like go, or even after we go to these places, and there's a lot of history surrounding places like asylums and old hospitals. Like, do you have a favorite history of a place you've been?
Yeah, I think I do. There's I'm actually in the middle of doing research on it now, or we were in the middle of doing research on it, but like I'm trying to think about how to word it. There's a place on the East Coast that's like an old mansion, and a lot of people, as far as I'm aware, don't really know about it necessarily, but they know about other things in the area. And I think it's all tangled up in like some like lawsuity, like legal stuff, but the guy like left, and like there's just like the strangest, most bizarre things left behind, like that really should, I don't know, like things that you would not expect, like ranging from like antiques to like weird statues, like the weirdest things. And like when at the time when I went there, I really had no sense that any of that stuff was there, and it really made me start to kind of dive in and do research, and there really wasn't a lot of information. So like the minimal things that we could find, like just like property records and like little bits and pieces of history on like the owner, where we could find them, like really fascinated me, because it's like it kind of goes into that whole thing about a lot of these places, like why are these things left behind versus other things that aren't, or why we would get up and leave. And that was just one of those like places. It was just a really, really good example of that. It was like, why are these things left behind versus other things? Like that's really strange.
Yeah. And like I get that feeling a lot of times with abandoned churches. Like, why did you leave the church? Like, that's the house of God. Like, where did you go?
I feel like a lot of churches or religious places, it's one of those things, like they Catholicism, like the best architecture and the best style and everything about it, but like everything's so ornate, and then those are always the places that always seem to be left behind or to go out. And I don't really know if it's because they're not willing to repurpose or whatnot, but like it always seems to be that situation, especially with those things. Like, it's like they close them up and they don't really do anything with them or don't even take anything out. And it's sad because a lot of the stuff in these places is absolutely incredible. Even things like stained glass and things like that. Like, at that point, like, they should be taking them and protecting them. But like, how many times have we seen churches that are like obliterated and like and like you totally missed an opportunity to like at least salvage things that at least at one point they were very proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like the stained glass. Like I've talked about it a few times on the show. Like, one day I want to open an Urbex museum. I don't know where I'm going to put it, like, in the world, but I have this like dream, because there are things like that. Like, you could have like a stained glass window, or you could have like not everybody, but a lot of people take like little trinkets from these places. And like, if they like donated them to a museum and like had like a plaque that said like the story of how they like their exploration, I think it would be so fascinating to have something like that.
Oh, absolutely. That's such an incredible idea, honestly. And yeah, for sure. I think, again, it's like, because how many times, like, I always say that time moves differently in this hobby than any other hobby, because you could say, oh, I'm going to go somewhere, and like if you want to go somewhere with your friends, like out, and like, you're like, oh, we'll go in like 3 or 4 weeks. If you say that in this hobby, like 3 or 4 weeks is like 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
Because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know like what's going to be left, or you don't know like how things are going to change, whether it's weather or people or or anything.
Yeah, and like things get sealed all the time, especially because of like YouTube videos. Like, I mean, I went to Denver recently, like in November of last year, and we went to an underground military base. It was like they used to store like intercontinental ballistic missiles in this place, right? And there was one entrance in, and it's completely sealed shut now. And it's like, we might have been the last people to be able to go in there. And it's
That's
like
such an awesome feeling.
It's so crazy. There were just miles and miles of tunnels and like endless darkness. It was absolutely magnificent and quite scary, actually, to be underground, no phone service, in the dark by yourself. Like, fuck that.
Yeah, that I have not had the pleasure of doing to that scale. I don't really know how I'd handle that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a big fan of underground stuff. Like, I have a dream of going into the catacombs, but like, fuck, that terrifies me at the same time.
No, I think I could handle that a little bit. Again, like, heights is definitely not. Anytime I've had to do anything involving climbing of any sort, if God help me, if I look down, I'll just freeze, and then someone's gonna have to like get like a crane to crane me out of there. Like, I won't move.
Oh man.
Like, I know some people who do like the climbing thing too. Like, they'll go like on top of skyscrapers and stuff and take their pictures or do whatever.
Yeah.
Or like they'll climb bridges. And every time I see anybody post any of those kind of pictures, I'm like, I would be that friend who would be like halfway up and be like, yeah, I'm done, so I'm not going down, I'm not going up. Like, I
live here now.
Yeah, I am one with the building.
This is my spot. Thank you. Oh my god.
Unless you're gonna fund my removal, just leave me be.
We'll figure it out sometime. Maybe I'll grow wings and fly off of this thing. We'll see. Oh man, can you talk about social media and what it's done for you as both an explorer and a creator?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like the thing I'm probably the most grateful for, or the things I'm most grateful for, are definitely having like a record of my stuff that comes very natural to doing. I mean, we're all in this generation that we all post, and it's just like second nature to post on social media, be it Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And being able to look back at things and be like, oh yeah, like I went here, when did I do this? And being able to go see those things is super, super helpful. And aside from that, like in general, like be that any of the things I'm doing, whether it's guitar or any of those things, because I only have one account. Like, I'm a believer. My page is not necessarily like an explored page. It's just like whatever I'm feeling at that moment. Just 9 times out of 10, it's going to be abandoned buildings. But that's something that I've always been really happy about. And also too, just like motivation to and it's a double-edged sword, but motivation to edit and to put content out, because like I do like editing. I like going through my photos and thinking about different things and having ideas, and I feel like it does kind of keep me thinking about those things. The other side of that being like sometimes you kind of fall into a trap of like posting or trying to find content for the wrong reasons, which is something that I feel like everybody needs to try to check themselves with sometimes. But like in general, I think it's really nice to have like a platform to be able to want to put your stuff out there and to want to do something like that. I feel like social media at its core, looking at it positively, should be a way for you to put things out there for you, not for anyone else.
Yeah.
And being able to have that platform that your friends or whoever can see what you're doing and what's interesting you for you is the ideal. And I think that that's probably what I'm most grateful for about it. And again, like there's that, again, the double-edged sword side of it. You get sucked into that rabbit hole of like, oh, like, are people going to like this? Maybe I won't post it. But like, you know, like it's a whole learning experience, and you kind of get used to those things and not get too addicted to it. But it's nice having that platform, especially because like, I mean, we were talking about it before we started, but like, I feel like I think a lot of people in this hobby have like a very strong introverted side of their personality, and it's the idea of giving an introvert a platform. And I feel like a lot of us, I mean, I can speak for myself. Like I was a very awkward kid growing up, and like, you know, I love to create. I've always loved art, but like I didn't really have like necessarily like the means to be like, hey everybody, like look what I'm doing all the time. And having a way to maybe not necessarily like having an opportunity to post things and to do things that I'm proud of, just for the sake of feeling like I'm proud of them, has been very nice and very cool.
Yeah. And I think social media is so special. You know, it brings this community together, and obviously there's pros and cons
for
of it.
better or worse.
Yeah, exactly. There's pros and cons, like we talked about earlier, with people like hitting up your friend, like aggressively hitting up your friend, like for locations. Like, you know, there's a lot of that, but I think that overall the community is very, very cool and very supportive online.
Oh, yeah, no, I would agree. I don't think I would be doing this to the extent that I'm doing it now if it wasn't for the fact that I've met so many awesome people. Again, it's that idea of like we all come from different walks of life and different locations and different areas, yet we just have that common interest, and being able to make connections based off of that singular interest is really, really special and really cool. It's not like that's a coworker and you just work together, so yeah, you're cool with each other. Like you've made the effort to meet up and to talk about things and to like have that bond. So those kind of friendships that you get from this, it's special for that reason. Like you kind of, especially if you can kind of break through that glass ceiling of like just the abandonment, and like you can kind of like make connections just from doing this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then do you have any bucket list items, places that you're dying to go that you haven't been to yet?
There's definitely, me and my friends have such like chaotic lists of things that will be like, oh, like we have to do this, or oh, we have to do this, and then we have like no attention span, so we'll forget about it 5 minutes later until like a month later. But yeah, I really want to get out farther into Pittsburgh area in PA. That's a place that I've always like threatened to do, and down south more into Maryland and Virginia. I'm New Jersey based, and going down into Virginia and Maryland more, which is a sin because I don't live far from Maryland at all, and I'm always like I'm gonna go there, and then I like don't do it. But like there's just hospitals and things like that down there, and just like little things that like I kind of keep piling up, because there's, you know, that's how it goes. It's like you don't go out to a place, but then you find more things, or you do more research on things, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll eventually do it, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I have a lot of things to go do. I should probably finally stop threatening and go do it. For
sure. Absolutely. And if you're anything like me, like getting over to Europe as well is like a huge goal.
Oh God. Yeah, that's the dream.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done Portugal, which was sick. I did parts of Greece, which was super cool, but there's definitely like other places I want to go that are in Europe, you know, that are just, obviously Chernobyl is like top of the list for most of us.
That's, oh, well, yeah, I mean, obviously. And
the epitome of abandonment.
Oh, well. And yeah, no, that's incredible that you've been there. That's something that I definitely aspire to do. That's probably like the end game of like wanting to do this kind of stuff. Yeah, I every time I think about it, I'm just like, oh God, I need to do that sooner rather than later. I'm like, all right, well, like let's let's take a breath. It's gonna happen if it happens. But yeah,
absolutely. And if you could live in one place you've explored for 1 week, like comfortably, which place would it be?
Probably the place that, again, me and my friend just finished cleaning up a section of. Definitely, because like it was funny because we were literally just there yesterday, and we were finishing sorting out one of the rooms. It's this old it's like an old house in South Jersey, and we we literally looked at each other because like I finished taking my pictures and she was doing her thing, and I literally just looked at her. I'm like, I could live here. Like, and she was like, yeah, I know, same. And I'm literally sitting like on this couch, like half asleep, super comfortable. And I'm like, wow, like I'm very comfortable right now, because we've been going there like over the course of like the last month, like at least like once a week. So I'm like, to the point where I'm like, so how do squatters' rights work exactly? Is this ours now? Like, how does this work?
Wow.
But yeah, we definitely find places over time that you're definitely comfortable enough in to do that. It's just like, it really goes to show you too, like that whole thing. I think the idea of like looking through things and setting stuff up, be it like, you really don't know what you're going to find until you really start looking. I mean, like if you're a purist and you don't move anything, that's really awesome. I used to be like that too. I think that that's fantastic. But like, there's a lot of really incredible things in places that are just like totally thrown around. And if you take the time to look through things or read things, like you can find a lot of really magical things. And if you're doing it for pictures, or you're doing it for the sake of just cleaning up because you want to do it, like you can really make some magical things out of what seems to some people as like nothing.
Right. Absolutely. And what is the farthest you've traveled to explore?
Probably. Yeah, I went to North Carolina with my family a couple years ago, and it wasn't primarily for that, but like I had all these plans already, so I guess like for me it was primarily for that. But I did a couple little things in North Carolina near where some of my family lived, and I remember there was a really cool one, again, like just like natural decay in nature. There was one of my I had a couple pins in that area, but one of my cousins was like, oh yeah, there's an abandoned school in this town, you should go check it out. And I was like, wait, really? And like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, it's like right down the road. So that night I went to it, I took pictures. It was really cool. It was easy. There was like no fences, there's no signs, there's nothing. And I show her the pictures and she's like, oh, that's really cool. Like, but that's the school I went to. I'm talking about the other school. And I'm like, there's another school? And she's like, yeah, next door in the woods. And it was actually an old segregated schoolhouse that had been closed since like 1954 probably. Wow. Deep in the woods. And they're making jokes and they're like, oh, like city boy, like watch out for rattlesnakes. And I'm like, oh my God. But like I went and did that, and that was really, really, oh God, that was just really incredible. And I don't know, like I think the best parts of this kind of stuff is just like having like that history be like embedded in places. So that was really, really cool. That's probably the farthest thing that I've probably done.
Yeah, I remember going to I don't want to say the area in North Carolina, but I remember going to North Carolina while I was on Van's Warped Tour as a content creator in
so
2017. Cool. And we had a day off in this town, and I was like, well, guess what we're doing today? So I grabbed a couple friends on the tour and was like, yo, you guys want to just take an Uber over to this like abandoned boys school / boys prison, like a juvenile detention center kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we went and explored it, and I flew my drone just as it like began to start raining, and I like pan over and I'm like, what is oh my God, they built a new detention center like the next property over that was active.
Oh my God.
And so we're just like on this hill just going through all these houses or these like school buildings, but they're like big houses basically. And I was like, we should probably leave before we get arrested. Oh God, the crazy things we do for this stuff. And
you didn't know at the time that it was
no
there?
idea. I had no clue.
Oh my God.
But it was like, had its fence line and like everything. And we were like, oh shit, we should definitely get out of here.
Yeah.
And my last question for you is, what is something you know now that you wish you knew when you started exploring?
Pacing yourself, for sure. When you first start, I feel like it's like a gradual. I mean, at least for me, it was very gradual, where you start doing this stuff every once in a while, and then when you really start getting into this stuff, it's that whole like invincible feeling. You're out every weekend, you're out all the time doing it like nonstop, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And you learn that really quickly. I think the one thing, yeah, that kind of goes into just like knowing your limits, and like knowing that a lot of these places, I know, like I said, that like if you wait a couple weeks, like who knows what's going to happen. But at the same time, like you come first, and your personal life comes first, and you can't get like super sucked into this stuff all the time. Especially like if it's like really, really hot or really, really cold. I was out all winter doing this, and like it sucks doing this in the winter on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And like just knowing your limit, I think, and just being able to say like, yeah, no, I'm good. I don't necessarily need to go do this today. I can wait like a couple days. And if I can't do it in a couple days because I missed my chance, like that is what it is. I feel like we get so hung up on seeing everything, because that's just the mentality of this, that we kind of forget that, like, before you went to the place, you lived without it before you knew it existed. So like you don't necessarily need it in your life if you're exhausted or if you have other things that you need to be doing.
Definitely. And if people want to keep following your journey and see your photography, drop your social media or any links you have, and we'll wrap the show up.
Awesome. Yeah. DragonboyAC on Instagram. I'm pretty sure it's DragonboyAC on YouTube too. I haven't done one in a while. I'm slacking, but I do music covers on there for guitar. But yeah, and if you want to get in contact with me, if you type in DragonboyAC, you'll probably find it. It's just weird enough of a name where it usually appears.
All right, that was my episode with DragonboyAC. If you want to check out his photography or any of the things he does on his urban exploration journey, head down to the description. You will find links to his Instagram. And thank you guys for listening to another episode of the No Tracers podcast. My name is Kay. I'm your host on this show. You can find me at no.tracers. And if you want to come on the No Tracers podcast, hit me up at no.tracers on Instagram. I would love to have you on. That's how DragonboyAC actually came on the show. He DM'd me on Instagram and we got him on the show. So if you have stories you'd like to share about your urban exploration journey, hit me up there. Otherwise, leave a rating and feedback. It helps the podcast grow. It helps us find a broader audience of listeners just like you. And I'll talk to you next week for another episode of the No Tracers podcast. Stay strong, keep enduring, go out, go explore something, and remember, leave no trace.